Have you ever felt like the more you try, the further they pull away? You text, they disappear. You open up, they shut down. What if I told you it's not about saying more, it's about saying it at the right time? When you're dealing with someone shaped by attachment theory, timing becomes everything. Push too early, you lose them. Wait too long, you lose yourself. So the real question is, can you master the space between chasing and detaching? Because that's where power lives. And today, you're going to learn exactly how. Most people make the same mistake when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style. They expect them to move at the same emotional speed, but that's where everything starts to fall apart. When you understand the principles of attachment theory, you begin to realize that avoidants operate on a completely different rhythm. They don't process emotions instantly, and they don't open up just because the moment feels right to you. Their timing is slower, more guarded, and often unpredictable. And if you try to rush that rhythm, you don't bring them closer, you push them further away. Think about it like this. When you feel a connection growing, your instinct might be to lean in, to talk more, to clarify feelings, to secure the bond. But for an avoidant, that same moment can feel overwhelming. What feels like closeness to you can feel like pressure to them. And pressure is the very thing they are wired to escape. So when you push forward, they step back, not because they don't care, but because their internal system is telling them to protect their space. This is why understanding their rhythm is power. It teaches you that connection with an avoidant isn't built through intensity. It's built through patience. You have to learn to slow down, to stop measuring the relationship by how quickly it's progressing, and instead focus on how naturally it's unfolding. Because when you stop forcing moments, you create space for them to come toward you on their own terms. And when they do, it's real. It's not driven by pressure, but by choice. Another important part of their rhythm is inconsistency. One day they may seem fully present, engaged, open, even affectionate, and the next they pull back, become distant, or go quiet. This confuses a lot of people. They start overthinking, questioning what went wrong, or trying harder to get that closeness back. But the truth is, this push and pull is part of their emotional processing. When things get too close, they retreat to regain control. It's not a game, it's a pattern. If you don't understand this, you'll react emotionally. You'll chase during their distance. And that's exactly what breaks the connection. But if you do understand it, you respond differently. You don't panic. You don't overwhelm them with questions or demands. You hold your ground. You give them the space they subconsciously need, while staying centered in yourself. That's what makes you different from everyone else who tried to force them. Learning their rhythm also means letting go of control. You can't control how fast they move, but you can control how you respond. And that's where your strength lies. When you stop trying to speed things up, you stop creating resistance. Instead of being someone they feel pressured by, you become someone they feel safe around. And safety is the one thing avoidants rarely experience in relationships. But this doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. Understanding their rhythm isn't about tolerating breadcrumbs or waiting endlessly. It's about balance. You match their pace without abandoning your standards. You stay patient, but not passive. You remain open, but not desperate. Because true mastery is not just about adapting to them. It's about staying grounded in who you are while allowing the connection to develop naturally. When you truly understand their rhythm, everything changes. You stop taking their distance personally. You stop reacting out of fear, and instead, you move with awareness, with control, and with quiet confidence. And that's the moment when the dynamic shifts, because now you're no longer chasing the connection, you're allowing it to come to you. One of the hardest lessons to accept when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is this: silence does not always mean rejection. But if you don't understand this, silence will feel like the loudest form of abandonment. You'll start questioning everything: what you said, how you acted, whether you did something wrong. And before you know it, you're reacting emotionally to something that was never about you in the first place. To really understand this, you have to look through the lens of attachment theory. Avoidants are wired to create space when emotions become too intense. Where you might seek closeness to feel secure, they seek distance to feel in control. So when they go quiet, it's often not a sign that they've lost interest. It's a sign that they are trying to regulate what they're feeling internally. Think about that for a moment. The very moment you feel the urge to move closer is often the same moment they feel the need to step back, not because they don't care, but because caring starts to feel overwhelming. Emotions, expectations, vulnerability, these things can trigger a sense of pressure inside them, and silence becomes their escape. It's how they breathe again. But here's where most people go wrong. Instead of understanding the silence, they fight it. They double text. They ask for reassurance. They demand clarity. They try to fix the distance immediately. And while that reaction is human, it actually reinforces the avoidance need to withdraw even more. What you see as effort, they experience as pressure, and pressure pushes them further away. Silence, for an avoidant, is not emptiness. It's processing. It's their way of sorting through emotions without feeling exposed or vulnerable. They don't always have the ability to communicate what they're feeling in real time. In fact, many avoidants struggle to even identify their emotions clearly in the moment. So instead of expressing confusion, fear, or overwhelm, they choose the one thing that feels safe: distance. This is why your response to their silence matters more than the silence itself. If you react with anxiety, you lose your emotional center. If you chase, you lose your power. But if you understand, if you stay grounded, if you allow space without making it mean something negative about you, that's where everything changes. Because when you stop interpreting silence as rejection, you stop reacting from fear. You stop creating stories in your mind that aren't real. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself just to maintain the connection. That calm, steady energy is something avoidants aren't used to. They're used to people panicking, pushing, or pulling away completely. But when you respond with quiet confidence, you create something rare: emotional safety without pressure. And that safety is powerful. It gives them room to come back, not because they feel forced to, but because they feel ready to. When there's no pressure waiting for them on the other side of their silence, they begin to associate you with peace instead of stress, and over time, that changes how they engage with you. However, understanding silence doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or disappearing behavior forever. There's a difference between someone taking space and someone consistently avoiding accountability. The key is awareness. You observe patterns without immediately reacting to them. You give space, but you also maintain your boundaries. Because your emotional stability should never come at the cost of your self-respect. When you truly grasp this, silence stops being something that controls you. It stops triggering panic or insecurity. Instead, it becomes something you can navigate with clarity. You learn to sit in it without losing yourself. You learn to trust your value, even when there's no immediate reassurance. And that's where your strength shows, not in how you react to their presence, but in how you remain steady in their absence. In the end, silence only has power over you if you misunderstand it. But once you see it for what it really is, a coping mechanism, not a rejection, you free yourself from the emotional chaos it once created. And that's when you stop chasing answers and start standing in confidence. One of the most misunderstood dynamics when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is the instinct to chase. It feels natural. When someone pulls away, you lean in. When they become distant, you try harder, you text more, you explain more, you give more of your energy, hoping that your effort will bring them back closer. But in reality, this is the exact pattern that pushes them further away. To understand why, you have to look through the lens of attachment theory, where avoidants are wired to resist pressure and protect their independence. Above all else, when you chase, even with good intentions, it doesn't feel like love to them. It feels like loss of control. The more you try to close the gap, the more they feel the need to create distance. It becomes a cycle. You pursue, they withdraw. You intensify. They detach. And over time, this dynamic drains you emotionally while reinforcing their instinct to stay guarded. That's why chasing never builds attraction. With an avoidant, it erodes it. This is where the shift has to happen. Instead of chasing, you start attracting. And attraction is a completely different energy. It's not loud, desperate, or forceful. It's calm, grounded, and self-assured. It comes from a place where you are no longer trying to convince someone to stay. You are simply showing up as someone worth staying for. That energy changes everything. Attracting means redirecting your focus back to yourself. It means you stop making them the center of your emotional world and start rebuilding your own. You invest in your growth, your goals, your routines, your peace. You create a life that feels full whether they are present or not. And ironically, this is what begins to draw them back in. Because avoidants are naturally pulled toward what feels safe and non-demanding. When you're no longer chasing them, you remove the pressure they're used to running from. There's also something deeper happening here. When you chase, you communicate without saying it that your emotional state depends on their response. You give away your power. But when you attract, you send a completely different message, that you value yourself, that your time and energy are important, and that connection with you is something that should be appreciated, not taken for granted. This creates a sense of curiosity and respect that chasing can never achieve. It's important to understand that attraction doesn't mean playing games or pretending not to care. It's not about ignoring them or acting cold. It's about genuine detachment from the outcome. You still care, but you're not controlled by that care. You don't overextend yourself just to maintain their attention. You allow things to unfold naturally without forcing them into a direction. Another key part of attracting is emotional consistency. Avoidants are used to extremes, people who are either too intense or completely withdrawn. When you remain steady, when your mood and behavior aren't dictated by their inconsistency, you stand out. You become someone they can't easily categorize or predict, and that creates intrigue. It makes them question, it makes them think, and over time, it makes them come closer. Not because they feel pressured, but because they feel drawn. But this shift also requires discipline. There will be moments when you feel the urge to reach out, to check in, to break the silence. And sometimes that's okay. But the difference is intention. Are you reaching out from a place of calm confidence or from anxiety and fear of losing them? Attraction only works when it's rooted in self-control. When you can pause, breathe, and choose your actions instead of reacting impulsively, you begin to operate from strength rather than emotion. At its core, stopping the chase is about reclaiming your value. It's about realizing that you should never have to convince someone to see your worth. The right dynamic doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from alignment. And when you focus on becoming your best, most grounded self, you naturally create that alignment. In the end, attracting is not just a strategy, it's a mindset. It's a way of moving through relationships with confidence, patience, and self-respect. And when you truly embody that, you don't just change how avoidants respond to you, you change the entire dynamic. Because now, instead of running after connection, you become the one it flows to. Third, one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to build a connection with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is believing that deeper always means better. They think that if they just open up more, talk more, and push for more emotional depth, the relationship will naturally grow stronger. But with an avoidant, it doesn't work that way. In fact, intensity at the wrong time can do more harm than good. This is why timing matters more than intensity. When you understand the foundations of attachment theory, you start to see that avoidants are not afraid of connection itself. They're afraid of losing control within that connection. Deep conversations, emotional vulnerability, and serious discussions can feel overwhelming if they come too quickly or too frequently. It's not that they don't want depth, it's that they need to arrive at it in their own time, at their own pace. Think about how most people approach emotional conversations. When something feels important, they want to address it immediately. They want clarity, reassurance, and resolution. But for an avoidant, being pulled into a deep conversation at the wrong moment can feel like being cornered. Even if your intentions are good, the timing can make it feel like pressure. And once they feel that pressure, their instinct is to shut down or pull away. This is why it's not just about what you say, it's about when you say it. The same words that could bring you closer in the right moment can create distance in the wrong one. If they've had a stressful day, if they're already feeling emotionally overloaded, or if the connection has just started to grow, pushing for depth in those moments can backfire. Instead of opening up, they retreat further into themselves. Mastering timing means learning to read emotional cues rather than forcing emotional outcomes. You begin to notice when they are more relaxed, more present, more receptive. Those are the moments where deeper conversations can happen naturally without resistance. It's in those calm, pressure-free spaces that they feel safe enough to lower their guard, even if just a little. There's also an art to how you approach these conversations. Instead of making them feel heavy or intense, you keep them light and open. You don't demand answers. You invite connection. You allow room for silence, for pauses, for gradual expression. This removes the sense of urgency that often triggers their defenses. It shows them that connection with you doesn't have to feel overwhelming. It can feel easy. Another important aspect of timing is patience. You have to let go of the need to have everything figured out immediately. Avoidants often take longer to process their emotions, and if you try to rush that process, you disrupt it. But when you give them time, when you allow things to unfold without constant pressure, they start to engage more willingly. Not because they have to, but because they feel ready to. This doesn't mean suppressing your needs or avoiding important conversations forever. It means being strategic and emotionally intelligent about when and how you express them. There is a difference between avoiding issues and choosing the right moment to address them. When you speak from a place of calm, when the environment feels safe, your words are more likely to be heard and understood. Timing also teaches you emotional discipline. Not every feeling needs immediate expression. Not every thought needs to be voiced the moment it appears. When you learn to pause, to reflect, and to choose the right moment, you gain control over your reactions. And that control creates a sense of stability that avoidants find reassuring, even if they don't say it directly. Over time, this approach changes the entire dynamic. Instead of associating emotional conversations with pressure, they begin to associate them with safety and understanding. They no longer feel like they have to defend themselves or escape. And as that sense of safety grows, so does their willingness to open up. In the end, timing over intensity is about working with the connection instead of forcing it. It's about recognizing that depth is not something you demand. It's something you build, moment by moment. And when you respect that process, you create a space where real, meaningful connection can develop naturally, without fear, without pressure, and without resistance. One of the most defining factors in how you experience a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is not what they do, it's how you respond. And this is where emotional control becomes everything. Because when emotions take over, especially in moments of uncertainty, distance, or mixed signals, your natural instinct is to react immediately. You want answers, clarity, reassurance. You feel the urge to fix the situation right away. But with an avoidant, those impulsive reactions often create the exact outcome you're trying to avoid. Through the lens of attachment theory, this makes perfect sense. Avoidants are highly sensitive to emotional pressure. When they sense urgency, intensity, or unpredictability, they instinctively pull back to regain a sense of control. So when you react without thinking, double texting, over-explaining, expressing frustration in the heat of the moment, it doesn't bring you closer. It signals pressure. And pressure leads to distance. This is why controlling your emotional urges is not about suppressing your feelings. It's about managing how and when you express them. There's a powerful difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate, emotional, and often driven by fear. Responding, on the other hand, is intentional, calm, and rooted in self-awareness. And that difference can completely change the dynamic of your interaction. Think about those moments when they suddenly become distant or take longer to reply. Your mind starts racing. You begin to assume the worst. You feel the urge to reach out again, to say something, anything, to break the silence. But that urge is not coming from clarity. It's coming from discomfort. And if you act on it without pausing, you hand over control of your emotional state to their behavior. Emotional discipline means learning to sit with that discomfort without letting it dictate your actions. It means pausing before you send that extra message. It means asking yourself, am I doing this because it's necessary or because I'm anxious? That small moment of awareness creates space, and in that space, you regain control. When you consistently respond instead of react, something powerful happens. You become emotionally predictable in a healthy way. Your energy stays steady, regardless of their fluctuations. And for an avoidant, that kind of stability is rare. They are used to emotional highs and lows, to people who either overwhelm them or withdraw completely. But when you remain grounded, you create a sense of calm that they don't feel the need to escape from. There's also a deeper level to this. When you control your emotional urges, you protect your self-respect. You stop overextending yourself just to maintain connection. You stop saying things you might regret later. You stop chasing validation in moments of insecurity. Instead, you begin to act from a place of confidence, where your actions reflect your value rather than your fears. And this doesn't mean you become distant or unemotional. It means you become intentional. You still express how you feel, but you do it at the right time, in the right way, and from the right mindset. You don't let temporary emotions create permanent damage. You don't allow a moment of anxiety to define your behavior. Another important aspect of emotional control is understanding that not every situation requires a response. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Not out of manipulation, but out of self-awareness. When you don't react impulsively, you allow the situation to unfold naturally. You give both yourself and the other person space to process without adding unnecessary pressure. Over time, this level of control shifts the balance of the relationship. You no longer feel like you're constantly trying to keep things together. You feel stable, centered, and in control of your own emotional world. And that energy changes how the other person interacts with you. They begin to see you as someone who is not easily shaken, someone who doesn't create chaos, someone who brings a sense of calm. In the end, controlling your emotional urges is about mastering yourself. It's about recognizing that your power doesn't come from changing someone else's behavior. It comes from choosing your own. And when you reach that point, you don't just improve your connection. With an avoidant, you elevate the way you show up in every relationship in your life. There comes a point in every connection with someone who has an avoidant attachment style where patience alone is no longer enough. You've tried to understand their rhythm, you've respected their space, you've controlled your reactions, and you've given the connection room to grow. But despite all of that, something still feels off. The effort feels one-sided. The timing never quite aligns, and you're left wondering how long you're supposed to keep adjusting before you start losing yourself in the process. This is where one of the most important lessons comes in, knowing when to step back, when you understand the deeper patterns explained by attachment theory. You realize that avoidants are consistent in one thing. They prioritize emotional safety through distance. And while that can be worked with to a certain extent, it cannot be carried entirely by one person. A healthy connection requires some level of mutual effort, even if it's imperfect. If you're the only one adapting, the only one being patient, the only one trying to hold the connection together, then it stops being growth and starts becoming imbalance. Stepping back is not about giving up. It's about gaining clarity. When you're constantly invested, constantly trying, constantly adjusting your behavior to make things work, you don't always see the reality of the situation. Your focus is on fixing, improving, holding on. But when you take a step back, you create space to observe. You begin to see patterns more clearly. You start to recognize whether the connection is naturally progressing or if it's being held together by your effort alone. This is also where self-respect becomes non-negotiable. It's easy to confuse patience with tolerance. You tell yourself that they just need more time, more space, more understanding. And while that may be true to some extent, it should never come at the cost of your own emotional well-being. If you find yourself constantly anxious, constantly waiting, constantly questioning your worth in the connection, then something is out of balance, and no amount of patience can fix a dynamic that lacks reciprocity. Stepping back means choosing yourself without anger, without resentment, and without needing to prove a point. It's not about creating distance to make them chase you. It's not a strategy. It's a decision rooted in self-awareness. You're not withdrawing to manipulate the outcome. You're creating space because you recognize your value and refuse to compromise it. There is strength in that kind of detachment. When you stop over-investing, you remove the pressure, not just from them, but from yourself. You no longer feel responsible for how the connection unfolds. You're no longer trying to control something that requires two people to work. And in that space, one of two things happens. Either they step forward and meet you with effort, or they remain distant, and that gives you your answer. Many people fear this moment because it feels like risking the connection. They think, if I step back, I might lose them. But the truth is, if stepping back causes the connection to disappear, it was never stable to begin with. Real connections don't depend on one person constantly holding everything together. They survive space. They grow through balance. Another important part of stepping back is emotional detachment from the outcome. You release the need for things to go a certain way. You stop trying to force a future that isn't naturally forming. And in doing so, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster of hope and disappointment. You become grounded again, focused on your own life, your own growth, your own peace. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring about yourself just as much as you care about the connection. You set boundaries, not as ultimatums, but as standards. You decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And once those boundaries are clear, you no longer tolerate situations that consistently leave you feeling unfulfilled. In the end, knowing when to step back is the ultimate form of mastery. It shows that you understand not just the other person, but yourself. It proves that your patience has limits, your understanding has boundaries, and your self-worth is not negotiable. And when you operate from that place, you don't just protect your peace. You attract connections that are capable of meeting you where you truly deserve to be.